7th, February 18th, live trading, San Diego. We got the Lowe's Coronado. I mean, what else would you want? This event is limited to 50 people. Look at your calendar, clear it, make sure you show up. If you want to be a rebel, this is the place to be. You got to sign up for it now. Giddy up, baby.
Or should I say, Pete?
John, that shirt that I got on there in that little promo-y thing or whatever, it's one of Dad's old shirts. Now, I'll probably say the same thing about this shirt someday, but that shirt of Dad's is great. It's one of his 5,000 Hawaiian shirts that are made out of the worst material in the history of material. And for some reason, I was wearing that day when we did that little tape down in Miami. But and my only other thought as we were sitting there having to be silent and me laughing about that was, John, it's the Christmas season. You're more Christmassy than me. I wish I had the hat. I'd be wearing the same daggone thing. But Bumpus Hounds, you sons of bitches! That what is that? Is that Christmas? Whatever the hell?
A Christmas Story, I think.
That is one of the all-time greats. And I've heard something really good this year, John. Another one to add to the collection, and you've been all over this, is I got firsthand from somebody who said they saw that Violent Christmas movie that came out this year. Off the charts. They said it is the funniest, best. It is absolutely unbelievable. And it's a pretty damn violent on top of everything else.
And you want to know why, Pete? It's only put out by the guys that did John Wick.
So those guys love violence.
Oh, yeah. So, Jared, what happens is a bunch of mercenaries invade this house. But what they don't know is the guy from Stranger Things, the star of Stranger Things, is Santa, and he's in the house.
You know, nothing says Christmas like violence.
Nothing says Christmas like mercenaries attacking Santa.
Hey, man, one of my favorite of all time is Die Hard, which was Christmas. That was a Christmas movie, too. Ho, ho, ho.
Ho, ho, ho. All right, folks. We are about to get started with the Rebels Edge. I am John Najarian, Pete Najarian, and, of course, Jared, our always on the ball producer that has to coordinate everything from 3 different locations.
What's up?
Today it's Chicago, Florida, and south side of Chicago. Or are you in the west side, Jared?
North side, uptown.
Oh, uptown. Okay.
Oh, uptown. Whoa. Mr. Hey, Mr. Lincoln Park or whatever. Whoa, hey now.
Yeah. All right, but as much fun as it is, we do have some sad news during our macro minute here, because Scott Minard, the chief market strategist over at Guggenheim, he'd been on the show with Pete and I many times. The dude had shoulders, Pete, out to here. He was both a power lifter and a bodybuilder. And sadly, we don't know what he passed of, but he passed at 63 years of age. And so we wanted to say that we've both enjoyed working with him. He's a very smart man, and Guggenheim, they certainly will miss him. We'll miss him. His friends will miss him. And boy, what a nice guy, Pete.
Well, and John, we're talking about guys that are involved in the global markets. And I throw that in there. I say guys because Tobias Letkovich, I mean, that's another one. I mean, we've lost some true greats in the market. And what I loved about Scott Minard was he was a guy that he was a big macro guy, right? I mean, that's really what he was for Guggenheim. But he appreciated the derivatives markets where you and I live, right? I mean, that guy, he would reference you or he'd reference me all the time in a very polite way, in a great way, because he'd talk about how much of a role the derivatives markets, the options markets, really play within the markets. And give you some insight into basically what people are looking for, whether that's positive or negative, bearish or bullish, whatever. And, you know, I fully appreciated the fact that he actually understood what we did for a living and actually brought it to the mainstream just that much closer, because so many others in that position are afraid to talk about what's going on in the derivatives markets. He wasn't, and he would constantly reference you or myself saying, you know, I heard the Najarians talking about these huge SPY buys, or, you know, spies, you know, put buys, or whatever it might be. Just a great guy who knew how to deliver, and he will be missed, I think, in the big picture of the macro world for sure.
Yeah. And boy, what a success story too, Pete.
Yeah.
Both Scott Minard and Guggenheim Partners. I mean, Mr. Walters, who started Guggenheim, Pete, lives right down the street from me when I'm here in Chicago. And that guy, my gosh, you know, they own the Dodgers. They're about to announce the acquisition of another pro football team.
Yep. Yeah.
And it might be football in the European sense, or it might be football in the American sense. I can't say yet, but Pete and I have been informed that there's some pretty good stuff coming their way. And it's just sad that Scott won't be part of that going forward, Pete.
Yeah. Yep. It is sad. Yep. But you know, things happen. It gets kind of weird sometimes. And 2022 has been a really weird year, including what we are seeing today, which is a heavy selling in markets after 500 up. Well, we're 600 down. I don't know how good of that trade really is, but I'll let you go, John. Yeah.
And I think the real thing here, Pete, is that economic activity, the Fed is going to have to keep their foot just nailed to the brake. They're not going to take it off and put it on the gas anytime soon, based on the numbers we saw today. And ludicrously yesterday, just because Nike had decent numbers, not great in your mind or mine, Pete, but decent numbers, people started buying like crazy. That was nuts. And that's why we've highlighted puts for most of the last several weeks, because that's what the big institutions are buying. Yep. So let's start off, Pete, today with Micron, because they're down hard today. They have basically a glut, I think is what they said, Pete. MU has a glut of chips, and that can never be a good thing. They're pushing down towards that 52-week low, which was hit at the end of September.
Well, you talk about a glut, John, and it's been brutal. The chips in general, this cyclical downturn that we're seeing right now is really playing out. And they had an absolutely horrendous quarter. Their forecast was also horrendous, and that looked pretty awful. They talked about the weak demand that started in early November. I'll tell you, John, there is a good reason why this particular stock is sitting at 52-week lows. That's where we are today. The sell-off was harsh. Not as big as actually I expected, but based upon where this stock was and where it is right now, it does make sense. It looks cheap on paper. Be very careful about that, because Tesla looked cheap a while ago too. There's a lot of names out there that are starting to look cheap, but I don't see reasons yet to start jumping in front of them. And Micron's definitely another one of those, John.
Yep. Broke the 50-day moving average. I mean, this thing's just spiraling. It did, by the way, hit a new low, even lower than the September 23rd low just minutes ago, Pete, trading in the 48 handle. Let's talk about Redfin. And it's not that we're trying to throw coal in everybody's stocking, but boy, get a load of some of these numbers. Redfin down hard today. You know what they do. This is basically a site you go to if you're looking for a home, or if you're looking for what your home might be worth. You might go there. Home sales in November, Pete, down 35%. Wow. Largest decline since 2012. I know you've got a number of areas of the country that you're looking at, but this is certainly one of those things that higher interest rates mean people can't afford a lot of these homes.
John, they're bleeding money to the tune of about $100 million. They got cash to debt that's a negative $1.3 billion. The stock was $40. Now it's $4.30 from 1 year ago. There's almost nothing you can come up with where you'd say, you know what, here's a good reason to buy it, because I'm not sure what that is. There's a reason why they're 17 to a 20% short interest right now, whether it's outstanding shares. It's just everybody is on top of this. They continue to press. when you look at some of those numbers, it's understandable as well, John. Take a look at Las Vegas. They're down, their sales are only down 51.8% year over year. So when the new homes are down 35%, like you referenced, there are parts of the country where it's really gotten ugly, and it likely will continue for a while as people are trying to get through what's going on right now economically and the positioning that they've got. And you look at those rates, sure, they've come off the highs, but they're nowhere close to where they were, John, just a year ago or so.
Yep. And it's California right behind Nevada, Pete, as far as, and it was Las Vegas, but it's San Jose, it's Salt Lake City, it's Stockton, California, Oxnard, California, all of these down nearly 50% or more year over year. So that's not good for Redfin, not good for Zillow, not good for the mortgage lenders, not good for buyers either, because buyers are sitting back, Pete. They're waiting because they think it's going lower. Let's talk about something else going lower, CarMax, KMX. Now, we've talked about Carvana extensively and how they're running out of money and probably having to auction off a lot of their vehicles to the wholesale market without making any profit and just trying not to lose, because they basically they have a glut, just like Micron's got a glut, Pete.
Yeah, again, and I always like to go to the fundamental side of it just real briefly, and I'll say this. Short interest, double digits. You're talking about 11 or 12%. Their debt right now, John, which is understandable on the business they've got, but it's $20 billion in debt. That's a bit of an issue, I think. You know what? It's buyer confidence right now. Are people very confident? And you and I both know, when you look at the used car market, they are very competitive price-wise to the new car market. So it makes a lot of sense that people are just sort of staying back. We've been told by guys that we know in the business to maybe wait a while if you're in that used car world, because things will get better price-wise in the next 3 or 4 months. But when you've got revenue down 24%, when you miss your earnings as bad as they did, John, I think 24 cents versus 65, that's not good. And the revenue itself missed as well. So across the board, this is one of those names where, do you really think you're buying the bottom? You better really think a little bit longer if that's what you're thinking right now.
Yep. The only good thing I can say about this one, Pete, is that it hit 52 this morning in the pre-market. In the regular session, it traded 52.10, and now it's $3 higher than that. So in other words, they really flushed a lot of people. That might have been margin selling and so forth, but watch the end of the day, because that's when the real margin selling usually hits, if there is true margin selling. All right, Cliffs, also known as Cleveland Cliffs. These guys are all about steel because, yes, they do mine for ore and things like that, Pete, but they don't sell it. They use it. They use it to make things like automobiles. And sadly, for the automakers, these guys have pricing power and prices are up. I saw that it was $1,400 a ton, Pete, versus $1,300 a ton. That's good for them, but that ain't good for the car makers.
It is not. And when you look at Cliffs, let's just remember this. In March, it was $33, John. Today, after sprinting up 7%, it's $16, cut in half. So this is why, people will say to us oftentimes, John, well, you guys are traders or whatever. This is why you do need to be a trader at times, because do you really want to ride this thing all the way down from 33 to 16? I don't know if that's the greatest move in the world either. And they've now maybe got an opportunity with some of this pricing that you mentioned, $1,400 a ton versus $1,300 a ton. That actually will help out a lot. But, it does make me wonder, the cost of steel making and the decline that we're seeing there. It really is a very, very difficult spot right now. But they, I think, might start to have a little bit of a move to the upside. So this one, I at least have a little bit of encouragement, John, based upon some of the pricing levels that they're going to be able to have going forward.
I agree. I think Cliffs is someone to watch with not just rebuilding and Pete and so forth, and forget about Build Back Better. Just put it back the way it was, Joe. Don't build it back better. But there's going to be a lot of pain. We've seen that Goldman and a bunch of firms are announcing layoffs. Microsoft, Micron, even Apple announcing layoffs, Pete. This is going to hit hard in 2023, especially right after Christmas. All right, let's talk about the IWM, small caps. We talk about this one a lot. And today they bought 19,000 of the February 164 puts. That was with the IWM, the ETF for the Russell 2000 small cap stocks, trading at 172.50. That's an awful lot of those puts, Pete, being bought. And that was a roll down. In other words, we're following somebody who was smart enough to buy a bunch of puts higher. How long ago? Oh, yesterday. Pete, they bought the 167 puts yesterday. They're already taking profits on those and rolling those down to about the same price they paid for the 167s yesterday. Now they're rolling that down to the 164s. So they're looking for lower. Beginning of December, Pete, they started buying when this index was over 184. And they have been hammering on these puts. And they've been right on these puts.
Yeah, and you're so right about that, John. And when you look at this whole thing, it's really interesting to see because yesterday we had an up day. It's up 500 points. They were buying puts. So you do have to pay attention to this, right? I mean, it would be one thing if they're trying to catch the momentum of the day. They were saying, you know what? This thing's going to start to unravel like it is today. And with that unravel, now, as you point out, they're making money. By the way, speaking of that, Deutsche Bank hits again. You talked about this one, I believe, on Tuesday, John. They were buying the January 11 puts, 6,300 of those puts. Well, they're buying them again. They're buying the January 11 puts, but I'm going to focus on the February 11 puts because they bought 6,000 more of those January 11 puts. Now they're buying 8,600 of the February 11 puts. 60 cents to about 62 cents is what they were paying for those. I'll tell you, John, this is a bank that I have not liked for a long period of time. I think there's a lot of more problems outside of the U.S. when you look at the financials, the banks themselves. This is one of them. I think that there's definitely downside here. I think both of us already have positions on in this one, or I might even add more. But instead, I'm going to try to be patient. And I'm going to try to be disciplined and not pile on too much. But my inclination is this stock's got a lot further to drop. And of course, after seeing all the options being bought, their put options, be careful out there because I think that there is a further drop for this stock as well.
Yeah, biggest bank in Germany, folks. So, it's not quite the same as Credit Suisse because Credit Suisse, people have been fleeing that for years and going over to UBS. But in terms of Deutsche Bank, they clawed their way back to double digits, Pete. They've been in the single digits for a very long time. Now it looks like they're heading back there. All right. Sadly, we have to say just a little something, Pete, about Franco Harris, immaculate reception and all. Franco was a great football player. He was also a tremendous member of the community, both the professional football community as well as there's a picture of him with your pal, Pete, Carl Eller. And look at how big he is. I mean, they're practically eye to eye, and Carl is all of 6'6". Now, granted, they both probably shrunk a little bit in their older age, but my gosh, that's a big man for a running back. And sadly, just as they were about to retire his number and so forth, and I don't know why they waited this long, quite frankly, Pete, but Franco's up there somewhere looking down and swinging that terrible towel, I'm sure.
Absolutely. It's sad for us to read about that, John. And it literally near the anniversary of the Immaculate Reception and all. And it's just amazing. And, it shows you the football community, how great it is. Because that picture you put up there with Franco and Carl Eller was a huge opponent of him, right? I mean, he was one of the Purple People Eaters. They played in the Super Bowl against one another back in the late 70s. So just an unbelievable person. I was lucky enough to have the opportunity to know Franco. I'm very good friends with Carl Eller, who's got some great kids who've played football as well. But I'll tell you, Franco Harris, big dude, to your point, John. I mean, the guy, you shake his hand wraps around yours. He's got those monster hands. He's a big, huge human being. You can understand why he was as good as he was as a running back for so long. He punished the defenders. He wasn't a guy who's taking hits. He's given hits. And guys like Carl Eller, like you point out, they're damn near the same size. So that gives you a little bit of an idea. When that big boy is getting himself running and he's running into those guys, he's delivering a lot of that pain. And he will be missed as a person because he was a great person within the community itself and a great ambassador of the NFL. So it's sad to see, but we both know that he's in a better place now.
Yep, very true. Well, Pete, what else do we have to cover in sports today?
Well, I think this is really interesting, John, because I think Tennessee is in trouble. And when I say Tennessee, I mean the Tennessee Titans. And here's why I say that. They've lost 4 in a row now. This was a 7-3 football team. They looked like everybody's, AFC team. Hey, these guys look pretty damn good. Problem is they've lost those 4 in a row. Now they're 7-7, and they've got a game Saturday against the Texans. That shouldn't be much of a problem for them. They ought to win that game. But on a short week, then they've got to play the Dallas Cowboys. It is in Nashville, but they got to play the Cowboys. Then they've got to go to Florida and play Jacksonville on January 8th. I think that's going to be a huge challenge because Jacksonville is sniffing around, and a guy named Trevor Lawrence is starting to look like an NFL quarterback, John. He's looked better and better and better every single week, and I think he's going to be licking his chops. Do you know why? Because Tennessee replaced the Vikings as the number 32 out of 32 teams against the pass on defense. These guys are terrible. They're giving up almost 300 yards a game passing right now. It could be really interesting because Tennessee, with the problems that I see, they lose 2 of the next 3. You know who takes that spot? Jacksonville. Jacksonville will leapfrog them. So that's going to be a really, really meaningful game, John. It should be a lot of fun to see how this plays out. By the way, Tannehill is out for the rest of the season. He's on IR. And you got Malik Willis at quarterback potentially. So what do you think? Can Tennessee do it, or do they got too many problems?
No, as good as Henry is, Pete, because he is a battering ram. He's not quite the size of Franco Harris, but he is a big man as well. And he runs over people. But if you can stack the box because, the quarterback is out, yeah, they're going to have another quarterback in there. And yes, I'm sure the other quarterback will complete passes, but he doesn't present the same threat that their starting quarterback did. And if they can stack the box, we've already seen on games when he was dinged up and they tried to just run the ball, that doesn't work out so well. NFL defenses are good to the point where if you can't really threaten them with the ball downfield, they are going to be right there at the line of scrimmage. That means he doesn't break loose for much. And that's my opinion, Pete, that you're going to see, because of that, both Dallas and Jacksonville get W's against Tennessee because of it.
Yep, they're gonna have to slam into that box. Well, the next one, John, is this. How about this for what team has the most momentum right now going into the final few weeks of the season? And here's what I'll give you. They've won 8 of the last 9. Early in the season, they lost to the Steelers. They lost to the Cowboys. They got revenge against the Steelers. They took down the best in the AFC. They beat the Titans. They beat the Chiefs. And everybody's like, who is this team? It's the Cincinnati Bengals. They're 10-4. These guys are on fire. Joe Burrow is absolutely becoming one of the best quarterbacks in the game. Josh Allen's right there, obviously. Mahomes is right there. I mean, those guys are sitting at the top. Joe Burrow doesn't get enough credit, John, because this is a guy who went to a team. He leads the league every single year since he got in the NFL for sacks because his offensive line is absolutely terrible. But this year, he's done a much better job getting rid of the ball even faster, despite the fact they haven't done much with the offensive line. He's got 31 touchdowns. He's got 10 interceptions, but he's got the number 2 in touchdowns, John, only to Pat Mahomes this year. His completion rate is 68%. It's one of the best. He's number 2 in all of the NFL. His yards are number 4. The problem right now for Cincy might be their defense because they're kind of in the middle of the road. They don't really get any sacks. Matter of fact, they're number 30 in sacks, so they're not pressuring quarterbacks. So the defense is a bit of an Achilles heel, but it hasn't mattered recently with that 8 out of 9 run that they've been on winning. What do you think about Cincinnati? Can they do it? You've got Buffalo. You got Kansas City. There's a lot of teams out there, but what do you think? Do you like the Cincinnati Bengals chances?
I do. Um, it used to be, Pete, that we'd always say that defense wins championships. Not so anymore. Everybody can score, even against great defenses. Look at the Bears versus the Eagles this past week. They didn't score a lot of points, but against the best defense in football, San Francisco on one hand, the Eagles on the other. Those are the two best, in my opinion. And stats kind of bear that out. But I would say being able to score is what makes the difference. It made the difference for the Rams last year, and it's going to make the difference this year for who gets there. So the fact that Joe Burrow can drive that team in almost any situation, I think is one of the reasons you want to bet on Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, obviously, AFC has a lot of tough teams, and we're looking at Buffalo right up there on top. But Kansas City, Buffalo, and Cincinnati, those are three really good football teams, Pete. So that's going to be just an incredible end of the season run to see which one of those gets to play the NFC champs.
Yeah, it should be great. And I'll tell you this, the last thing I'd say is Buffalo, the one thing that's really great about them, they have one of the best defenses in all of football, and they have one of the best offenses in all of football. So whoever has to play them when that day comes, whether it's Cincinnati or Kansas City or whoever, that's going to be a challenge because those guys are great on both sides of the ball. That'll be interesting.
Yep. Well, let me throw out just one last thing, Pete, because you and I were on it early in the week. And as usual, ESPN and everybody else seems to be sort of playing off of us. And I'm not kidding, because a lot of the topics Pete covers, folks, 2 days later, ESPN or somebody else will cover. Today, we're really focused in on the idea that YouTube indeed won. They paid $2.5 billion, maybe, Pete, somewhere between 2 and $2.5 billion for the rights for Sunday Night Football. It's ludicrous. I think it's bad for the NFL. It's good for their pocketbooks, but I think it's bad because I don't know how many of us, Pete, have a YouTube streaming account that you have that premium for. But if you don't, I don't know how many people are going to pay that extra $14 a month for it.
Yeah. You know what? I'm concerned, John. I shouldn't be overly worried, but I'm a little bit worried about what the NFL is doing with the money grab. Sounds great, but if that brings down the shield and tarnishes that shield of the NFL, that could be a problem. And what I mean by that is what you and I just discussed just the other day when we were talking about this, and we were discussing, hey, look, when you look at what these streamers are getting for viewers versus what they're getting when they're on CBS or NBC or Fox or whatever, the numbers are completely different. And it makes you kind of scratch your head and say, well, is it because of the people that stream on those kind of devices usually have devices that are much smaller screens and this, that, and the other? Whatever it is, I don't know positively, but it could be an issue, and it could be something that actually hurts the NFL in the future. So it's something at least to kick around a little bit, because all you've got to do is look at what does Amazon Prime's numbers really look like, and what does it look like against the big boys? And they're not even close.
Yep. And if that remains, Pete, then I think you're going to see, it becomes more of an elite product. And you and I have seen in the past what happens when a sport becomes elite and you don't have real true fans. And instead you have a bunch of people who, are there for the drinks. They're there for chatting with each other in the stands. They're not there pounding on those cushions like they do in Kansas City or in Buffalo or in Cincinnati. Those are places where the fans are just going crazy. When you get to some of these stadiums where people are sitting on their hands and they're not as vocal, it's not an advantage for the home team. And I think the same thing plays out with viewing on television. If you make it so that people really can't afford and they've got to say, well, of all the things I've got, I guess I can skip Sunday Night Football or whatever. because I'll be watching it all day anyway. And my wife gives me a hard time about, watching that as well. Maybe they'll just say, heck with it. I just won't watch it. And if I've got to, I'm going to go down to the bar and watch it. The bars, by the way, are going to have to pay $200 million, Pete, for Sunday Night Football. That's in addition to the money that they're getting. That's why I say it could run as high as $2.5 billion for
That's
this
unreal.
new contract.
Yeah.
I question it just like you do. I don't like it.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's crazy, but it is also flattering that a lot of these other folks out there are grabbing our stuff and putting it out there. We'll take it as a little bit of a pat on the back.
A little compliment. All right. Well, thank you for joining us for the special edition Christmas and Hanukkah edition. Pete's got his Hanukkah hat. I've got my Christmas cap on. And remember, folks, we're here Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursdays, 1 p.m. Eastern time. Again, we hope to be announcing very soon a different time slot and a major streamer. We'll be back Monday next week with more unusual activity as well as our take on the markets. We'll see you then.